Welcome everyone. Welcome to Portugal Air Summit 2020. It's a pleasure to host this afternoon session dedicated to the aviation workforce challenges for the coming years in the digital world. As we all know, we are facing an unprecedented crisis with the collapse of the aviation industry. But what has certainly not collapsed is the passion of young students for airspace, for space, rockets, and aviation. And so training organizations and educational institutions play a key role in reshaping the future of this important sector. For this discussion, I'm glad to host and receive the contributions of Professor Suzanne Kearns. Welcome, Suzanne. Professor Suzanne Kearns is an associate professor at the University of Waterloo in Canada. She does research on human factors, methodologies in training and education, and aviation safety. She is widely known for her efforts and work in close partnership with the Next Generation of Aviation Professionals program with ICAO, and also an author, as she has published several books dedicated to aviation. Thank you very much, Suzanne, for being with us today. We also have the presence of Vicky Princz. She's an instructional design specialist from the ICAO Global Aviation Training Office. She has more than 20 years experience in instructional design, with more than 6 years as a project leader in instructional design with Bombardier Aerospace, where she led several projects in training manuals, specifically initial pilot training manuals on aircraft systems for the C-Series and the Global 7500. Welcome, Vicky. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We also have with us Professor Rahim Talib from the University of Putra, Malaysia. Thank you very much for being with us. It's been so late in Malaysia. Professor Talib, he's a full professor at the University of Putra, Malaysia. He got his PhD in engineering science at Oxford. He leads the aerospace department at the university, has extensive experience as a consultant and researcher and in aerospace engineering. And specifically, he led the aerospace under the Industry Intelligence Division Group for Malaysian Industry Government Corporation. Thank you very much, Professor, for being with us.
Hello,
welcome.
Everyone.
And last but not least, Nadiir Bheekhun. Dr. Nadiir Bheekhun graduated in aeronautical engineering at the University of Glasgow in Scotland. He got his PhD in Malaysia at the University of Putra, where he has conducted research on the use of aerogels in space. After 10 years in Malaysia, he just recently got back to Mauritius, where he's natural from, just last week, and he's launching an interesting program dedicated to aviation training for the African context. So thank you very much, Nadiir, for being with us also. I would like to start this discussion by giving this context of, we could argue that really the universities and training institutions are kind of stuck in the middle, in the sense that the aviation sector has collapsed due to the pandemic, but it is our mission, obviously, to foster and develop young kids into highly qualified professionals, and this cannot stop, obviously, and it has to be, and has always been, a key factor in having a strong, robust, highly qualified sector, either it's aviation or space. So that role hasn't changed. So the challenge is, how are universities and training institutions adapting? And I would like to start with Suzanne first, to give a university point of view for this matter, but also including a kind of a human touch to it. What sparked your passion for aviation, and how can it be used to really engage young students to, despite the crisis and the difficulties, to convey the message that really it's a sector with a very bright future. So the floor is yours, Suzanne. Thank you.
Thank you. The short answer to the first part of your question is that
the University of Waterloo is only offering courses remotely at this time. So all of the classes that would normally be face-to-face are now fully online. It presents opportunities and challenges in a variety of different ways because students aren't required actually to come to campus. So many of the students I'm teaching are spread out all over the world in different time zones, which allows them to most of the time live at home and save money. So it's an interesting path that they can take to still make strides forward in their academic journey, while in many cases saving some costs along the way. But it doesn't work well for everyone. There's a lack of a sense of community. We have to really work hard to get them to get to know each other on a more social sense. All of those things that would naturally happen in a classroom if we were sitting side by side. So it is an issue. We are moving forward. I think the mandate of the university is to keep providing an education no matter where they are. We will continue to support them, but it's creating a variety of challenges. I can tell you from my personal experience, I have, I think a story that I share with a lot of colleagues who are around my age was that two things happened that inspired me to join the aviation industry. When I was young, I took a flight with my family and was invited up to the cockpit. This is before 9/11 when the cockpit doors were secured. But beyond that, I actually lived in a very small town, 2,000 people, and we were right under the flight path of a local small airport. And ever since I was a kid, I would sort of point up and say, that's going to be me one day. So I started flight training when I was 15 and soloed when I was 16, and I had my fixed and rotary wing licenses when I was 17. But then I faced something that I think I also share with a lot of young people today, which was that I was graduating. I went and through Embry-Riddle in the United States. I was graduating with all of my pilot credentials right when 9/11 happened. And so before that, everything was booming and the future was great. And all you ever heard was this, there's so many tremendous opportunities for you to be a pilot. And then in one day, the rug gets pulled out from under you and the story is the complete opposite. And so I had to think hard about how I could pivot, applying my passions in different ways. So I went back and got my master's degree, and then I've been in academia ever since. But the message I think that is really important for us to convey to young people is that aviation is and has always been a cyclical industry, and we can expect, we don't know when the recovery will happen, but we can expect that a recovery will happen. And we need to recognize today tens of thousands of current professionals are now leaving the industry because they're furloughed or laid off and there's no position for them to continue. So I think that we need to recognize the possibility that when that recovery happens, we might face more critical shortages of personnel than we were facing before the pandemic because of that loss, both of current professionals and of young people getting a message that this is a volatile industry and something they shouldn't pursue. So I think that we need to actively lean in to support young people through issues like ICAO's NGAP program, or the next generation of aviation professionals. And one of the key things I've been advocating for is that NGAP, or the next generation of aviation professionals, should become an academic discipline. And I sort of think of it like a toolbox. Right now, we don't have any of the tools, but we're all sort of doing things independently, amazing efforts around the world. But could we look at NGAP as being a toolbox, just like human factors established as a toolbox and populated by industry and regulators and academia with all sorts of different strategies? How can we come together, look at this NGAP issue to attract, educate, and retain people within aviation careers, and really synthesize and collaborate on doing that collaboratively and effectively together?
So, Vicky, as Suzanne mentioned, with several professionals leaving the industry, do you see, in terms of the daily work from the aviation training office, already some effect in the planned activities for the office? How are you coping with and adapting to this new reality?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And the answer is sort of counterintuitive, I think. I just want to thank you again for inviting me to the Portugal Air Summit. It's an honor to be here. So in March 2020, we were all told to go home, thinking it might be for 2 weeks, right? And we now know that the magnitude was far greater than what we might have imagined, with such significant impacts on aviation specifically. And to answer your question, the impact on global aviation training, or the GAT office was quite dramatic. From one week to the next, we went from a robust training schedule of over 300 courses to effectively nothing. And it was shocking to us all, as all classroom courses were canceled for the foreseeable future. But so we reviewed our mandate and we developed a response plan that we knew needed to be implemented right away, and we needed to respond to the new needs of our aviation community within the parameters and restrictions that the pandemic applied to us. So capacity building has to continue, but we also have to address the very immediate need to restart aviation within and also beyond COVID-19. So we had two main strategies. The first one was the virtualization of a lot of our traditional classroom course. We transitioned courses that were taught in the traditional classroom and modified them to be suitable for virtual classroom training. And then we also developed a key competency program. And for the virtual classroom courses, in order to do it in an effective and systematic way, we formalized the transition process. So we had a specific process that we applied to each course, taking into consideration the benefits and the drawbacks of the modalities. And as Suzanne said, there's been some benefits to this. There are people who people from states who might not have been able to come to the training who are now all of a sudden able to afford to take part in courses that they might not have had access to originally, because there's no transport cost, there's no accommodation cost associated with it. But there's also drawbacks, right? Like not everybody has equal access to internet, not everybody has equal access to power, to electricity for the whole day. So it's been uneven. We've also developed a course to train virtual classroom instructors, because even though the virtual classroom for GAT was born out of the pandemic, it was an approach that was born out of necessity. We don't think it's going to be going away. And every course that we develop now is developed not only for, it'll be always for two modalities. We'll develop for traditional classroom and for virtual classroom to make sure that we're ready for either delivery mode. And we've also developed shorter courses that's specific for the virtual classroom that address the competencies that need to be developed for pandemic recovery in aviation. So, and the second approach that we took, and we've been quite busy with those virtual classroom courses, and as I mentioned, the courses also on how to teach in a virtual classroom is also been quite important in developing a community that prepares us for this moving forward. And the second part of the approach that we took was to develop the key competency program. The different bureaus have developed and delivered webinars on responding to the pandemic, and they are designed to be able to support states to be able to respond in a rapid way. And what GAT has done is taken those courses and turned them into micro-learning, which is online learning, small bits, targeted competencies that are shorter than what we would normally do because they're really specific to this time. So contrary to what, and they're interactive and there's a certificate associated with them. So I think our rapid response has been really targeted not only to keep the consistent approach that we've always had to training, but also targeting using the modalities that are available to us and addressing the topics that are required. But it's been, you'd think that there'd be a slowdown, but I think it's never been busier. We've been really, like, in responding to this, we've really been nonstop. The need has been nonstop, and there's a curiosity and a thirst for training to respond specifically to the pandemic.
Yes, of course, and I like to say that in times of crisis, there is opportunity to dedicate time to invest in education and training, to upskill your capabilities. So those who can, in fact, do it, they should really do it. And since we are facing perhaps a 2 to 3 year time period of some recovery in the sector, that's exactly the period where the students can really get a degree if they don't have one and proceed with new qualifications to hope for a nice possible entry in the next few years once the sector bounces back. So this is very important. And Professor Rahim, looking into the aerospace sector, of course, with the aircraft and the industry on the ground, that implies also that the whole supply chain is affected. So that means all the engineering activity is affected. And so how do you see the context in Asia and specifically in Malaysia?
Okay, thank you, Miguel. With respect to the aviation or aerospace sector, basically in Malaysia, we divided the sector into various sub-sectors, namely the maintenance, repair, overhaul, and of course, the second major sub-sector for aerospace is aerospace manufacturing, and then we have the system integration, and finally, there are also activities on engineering design and services. So basically, these sectors all over Malaysia are having difficulties, especially in this pandemic situation, where when we started to experience the wave of the COVID-19 way back in January, but then the government of Malaysia decided in mid of March to decide that, well, this is about time to have a total lockdown for the whole of Malaysia. And we had them the situation for just for the beginning, it is only 2 weeks, and then it has been prolonged until mid of July. So in summary, the whole situation does disrupted the ecosystem of how do the not just the aerospace sector, not just the aviation sector, but because it impacted the tourism, it impacted the supply chain, the manufacturing sectors, and other surrounding smaller industries. So in order for us to cope with it, the government has introduces various strategies in order to reduce the impact on the industry, especially for the aviation, whereby because we have in Malaysia, we have two major airlines, which is the Malaysia Airline Holding, as well as the AirAsia. Probably some of you have already flown AirAsia, the low-cost carrier. But even with that, as a start, they lay off or they ground all the aircraft. As we all know that the longer the aircraft are being held on the ground, the more money need to be spent in terms of just to make sure that the aircraft are safe to be fly again. So the government also tried to relieve taxes, as well as at the same time give credits or soft loans to the two airlines that we have, but still the companies cannot run away of cost cutting in terms of have to retrench people. But now even we are now having what we call it as a third wave. Beginning of September, Malaysia has been impacted with the third wave. I believe Dr. Nadiir just get to be on the safe ground, where he managed to arrive or get away from Malaysia just on time before we have another lockdown in Kuala Lumpur and the capital. So what I can see that the impact of this current situation on the industry, whether it is directly or indirectly, it will be a prolong in terms of to recover back on the situation. It will take some time. Maybe we expect another year or two before the industry can move up again. Probably later on I can share with you what are the strategies on the academic side, because I will also share in terms of the strategies that we have already put up in order for us to cope with this situation. Thank you, Miguel.
Okay. Nadiir, how as a person born in Mauritius and knowing the context in that part of Africa, how would you see what are your thoughts on the current pandemic impacts on the aviation, and what are the opportunities also already to start looking forward in terms of training and attracting, obviously, and before the training to keep the interest of the young generations to not quitting the sector?
Okay, yeah. Thank you again, Miguel, for the invitation. So I feel honored to be here today at the Portugal Air Summit. So basically, coming to the situation of the pandemic, of course, as the industries across the world is still experiencing the impact of the pandemic, the aviation sector seems to be the most, or one of the most wounded industry. And of course, repercussion is quite grave in terms of job losses and also related to education and training, because in my humble opinion, basically, the category would be divided into three types of people. So first of it would be about the prospective university student that Suzanne has already been explained, and Prof. Rahim as well. And secondly, I believe that there would be the category of the current students. They would be feeling a bit reluctant because some of them wouldn't be able to complete their internship on time, or perhaps they wouldn't be able to graduate on time. So there's a bit of concern in terms for the current students. But coming to the third category that I would like to elaborate a bit is about the lucky staff that already that has been retained by the organizations. So AERONAD basically is being tailored for the training, education and training serving the continent of Africa. We are in Mauritius, but we are geographically, we are part of the continent of Africa, and Mauritius is quite well known being as an education hub. There are a lot of students across the continent who come to Mauritius to do their further studies, from bachelor to even PhD. So, but of course, AERONAD at the time that it started its kick-off initiative, it was just before March. So of course we didn't really foresee what would be happening, and at that time we had the intention to have a physical location in Mauritius to welcome the aviation professionals interested to do further studies in aviation across Africa. But then the pandemic came, and there was a total, really a change of plan, and it seems that the world has shifted to digital learning, to 21st century learning. And I would say that we have to take it positively at some point, at a certain point, because one day or the other, I believe that the 21st learning century learning would really channel to digitalization. So we had the opportunity to recalculate our move and to see how we can really serve the aviation professionals. So on the side of AERONAD, we tailored, we have 3 clusters. Basically, we set up 3 clusters. One of the cluster is the executive education, which really concern about the C-level executives, and we had the opportunity to be partnered with Atlântica University in Portugal. So I believe that is a really a great initiative together, because knowing that the Atlântica University is quite visible across the continent. So this is one of the cluster. It's about executive education for the airlines, for the aviation industry. And secondly, we had also the cluster for the aircraft maintenance, that are really basically the aircraft maintenance engineer for type training. And the third cluster is a bit about the academic cluster, which really serve for young professionals, I would say, from bachelor to postgraduate diploma and even to research. So this one will be, of course, taking time. For the time being, we dedicated our effort to serve the industry, the African aviation, through executive education. And recently, I believe it is in August, at the end of August, we conducted one free masterclass in collaboration with Atlântica University, and also it was very well, really, the response was quite positive. It was not a webinar. It was more like trying to fit into a class to teach, to groom the executives through online delivery. So we had the opportunity to explore this, and it was very well welcome. We had 300 participants, even though it was tailored for the African aviation, but we had participants across the world, because some of the airlines are serving the African continent, and of course they were part of it. So in terms of the education and training, I would say that it is high time for us to really adapt, to find strategies to adapt to the online delivery. It will be taking time, of course, to return back to normal, I would say new normal or normal. So we have to be patient, and we should be also be always positive. Optimism should be one of our drivers. So this is a bit of what we have done since March until now. And coming to, if I narrow down to Mauritius, and in terms of the aviation here, the aviation industry, so the borders have been reopened. We are reopening the borders into 3 phases, and we are currently in the first phase, whereby the citizens, the permanent residents, or the businessmen, they are allowed to come. And recently, right now, I am in a quarantine hotel, and at my back there is the seaside, so but you cannot see it, unfortunately. Otherwise, it's a very nice view at the back. But I am on the ground floor. You can see some plots behind me. So I'm already my 12th day of quarantine, and everything is going well. They are really adapting the way of trying to reopen ways to accept air travel. So the hotels across Mauritius are serving as a quarantine hotels. Some of them are not, but some of them, yeah. Yes, and well, we got nice food, but we are not allowed to roam around the beach or swim. The penalty is quite high, but nevertheless, I believe that I really appreciate the way that this has been handled, and many of we are by the end, although that we are by the end of the first phase, the beginning of the second phase, we can see that there are many tourists that are really interested to come to Mauritius. So they are coming for long term, from what I could observe, although they have to remain for a 14-day quarantine in a hotel, so that's fine with them. But nevertheless, after that, they are free, and they can go for a hotel, for a normal hotel, whereby they can enjoy their time. So I believe that in terms, well, Prof. Rahim just mentioned about the case of Malaysia. Of course, the population of Mauritius is quite small, is around 1.3 million. So definitely is quite easy, I would say relatively easy to handle compared to a more populated country. I wouldn't say that I am proud, but it is just a matter of relativity in terms of the population.
Okay, Nadiir. Let me stop you there, and taking this opportunity, you mentioned about the training online. Yes, we need to move. Suzanne, looking forward, and in spite of being in a period of recovery, but considering the digital context and the digital transformation that we will for sure experience, in your view, how will the students learn in the, let's say, the midterm future? And how can the universities and the training organizations adapt to it? So that would be another question also for Vicky.
Absolutely. Well, I think just the short answer is that I don't think we'll ever go back to the way we were. I think the reality is instructors who've been teaching for a long time, sometimes we tend to do the same thing semester over semester, to the point where some of the older generations might still be using overhead projectors, like the clear plastic that's shot. And so that was a big, hard adjustment to move into a digital, conveyance of material. But I think it's forced a lot of evolution that will likely still influence our future. But I really want to make a quick point before we move on, which is that I do think that this pandemic presents an opportunity for us to rethink a lot of traditional practices, similar to old school, outdated teaching practices, to really ask ourselves how we can embrace sustainability as an industry. And so sustainability really is the three pillars of the economic, the environmental, and the social. And right now, with all of the operators grounded, of course, the economic impacts are devastating. And so, of course, we're not sustainable economically. But pre-pandemic, there was this increasing flight shaming movement, where there was this increasing emphasis on the environmental impacts of aviation, and then the end gap issue, or looking at young people and the retention of existing professionals, is very much a social issue. And so I feel that our industry, if we're going to set ourselves up for future, we need to think about, when the eventual recovery happens, are we using sustainable practices that are finding that balance between the economics, the environmental impacts, and the social impacts, and really leaning into finding that balance and addressing those issues, because otherwise we're going to find ourselves in a recovery facing the same personnel shortages and the same environmental challenges that we were before it started, and not capitalizing on the fact that this is maybe the only time in aviation in recent history where we have an excess of expertise who aren't fully committed to operations, who could help us innovate the way we're doing things.
Vicky, your thoughts?
I agree with Suzanne. I don't think we're ever going to go back to how things were. And I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that what we have to do is we have to learn how to bridge the distance between us. And it seems like it's a big challenge to do that with all these screens that separate us. But we have to remember that prior to this, in the traditional classroom, there were bridges that divided us as well, and they were financial ones and economic ones. Training wasn't accessible to everyone, and now it's quite a bit more accessible in many ways. So I would say that the virtualization of training is a bit of a democratizer in some levels, still presenting challenges because access to even online training isn't universal at all at this point. But I think it does afford us the opportunity to make, if we're talking about competency building across aviation and standardizing approaches, it means that training is available to more people in more countries, and to do it in a more even and standardized way. So I think, I don't remember who it was who said optimism is a requirement right now, but I think if we're taking the optimistic view, then I think these new ways of learning and training could be beneficial. Now, I think we're all fond of seeing one another in a traditional classroom, and there's something special about that. And hopefully, as we recover from the pandemic, as vaccinations and rapid testing are made more available, and we adapt, that will still be a part of our roster. But I think there's some interesting things that can be born out of the virtual training environment and online courses. And I think that as we move forward, we're going to get better and better at it. And it'll probably be a more hybrid approach. So rather than taking a traditional course and putting it onto a virtual course with a similar timeline, we might break it up into segments of micro-learning and identify targeted and tailored needs, and try to meet those more specifically, which speaks to the environmental, the sort of sustainability aspect of it. Because you might not want to go to a 5-day course, but you might have a lot of value from a 1-day course. And it's forcing us to be a bit more agile and responsive and resilient, and looking more closely at the needs of aviation as a whole. So lots of opportunities, I think.
Thank you. Rahim, Vicky just mentioned something very important that I also believe the digital context really provides a democratization of access to education, but not only this, but also something that is really in the core of ICAO's focus for the next, say, decades or so, which is harmonizing standards in training. So the access to training, but also to the same standard training. Do you think this, do you agree with this, that the digital context should help also in that way, to have globally across the world the same standard in training, which is so important in the aviation aerospace industry, of course?
Yes, yeah, I totally agree with what Vicky has mentioned just now about more and more people can get access to training. And talking about having a standardized training is very important, especially for the aerospace industry, whereby it is a highly regulated industry, where you want to make sure whatever being done in Malaysia, it has the same standard in Canada, it has the same standard in Portugal, it has the same standard all over the world, of course, Mauritius. But talking about methodology of training, the point that I want to say earlier about what are the initiatives that are being embarked by the education providers in Malaysia, as well as the major aerospace industry players in Malaysia through our initiative, through this, what we call it as the National Aerospace Blueprint, way back in 2015, where we chart a 15 years roadmap for Malaysia. And I'm one of the author to craft the particular roadmap. And these are, I would like to share here, is basically the two main initiatives on education and training. The first one is on topic of training of the future, where way back in 2015, we already projected that there will be time that the training has to be converted or make full use of the digitalization, where we make full use of augmented reality, we make full use of artificial intelligence and virtual reality. So basically nowadays in the era of where employees use technology in every aspect of their day, has led to all kinds of possibility in training as well as in development. So it is predicted that the implementation of Industry Revolutions 4.0, I believe all over the world are already embraced of IR 4.0. The manufacturing routines, activities will be entirely or partly taken over by machine. But that does not mean that we will neglect the training for the people. And the second aspect is on the factory of the future, where we already engaged with the 24 major aerospace companies in Malaysia to take part in this movement, where the factory of the future domain in Malaysia holds both identified technology required for the aerospace industry, especially for the aerospace manufacturing, to remain competitive, and the Industry Revolution 4.0 topics that needs to be matured to be implemented. So the aspect of the industry players as well as the universities that are working together, we are trying our very best to make sure the agenda of the digitalization of education and training will be beneficial to the industry. So we are now already 5 years in our aerospace blueprint roadmap, and I can say that this pandemic is a blessing in disguise, whereby we can see that it's really happening, where we make full use of what we have planned 5 years ago, and this is the time to implement it. I think I can stop at the moment for the time being.
Yes, okay, thank you. We have, time flies, we have about 10 minutes or so, but I would like just to start a final round for each of you, and starting with Nadiir. What would you like to get from the industry right now? Of course, we understand that the industry is hurting, but from the educational point of view, what would be the best type of initiatives that you would get from the stakeholders in the industry to really strengthen this connection between academy and the industry? Because in the end, we are stuck in the middle. our mission is to transform young kids in highly qualified professionals. So we need to strengthen this connection. And in times of crisis, I think this is obviously an urgent issue. So Nadiir.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your question, Miguel. So I'll try to be shorter this time. So basically, in a way that we brought forward a concept whereby we call it as acadestry. So AERONAD is being driven by this notion whereby there should be an harmonization between academia and industry, because most of the time we could feel that the industry would feel that the academia is not really related at all to what they are doing. But I believe that's really not really the case nowadays. Perhaps before it was really quite separated, but nowadays we really need to have this merging of academia and industry so that we can go forward. And one of the example would be, of course, we can take up an example in the aviation as well, in the aerospace. So in the aerospace, it would be more or less an R&D. So the R&D at the university level would be really not having sense if there is no industry component really working together with it. Otherwise, we wouldn't really know what is the real gap between what is the gap in the technology. So this is the industry is always a bit further beyond, and hence there should be a communication between the industry and the academia. As far as the aviation education and training is concerned, I would say that there are a lot of professional professors at the academia level who are really working hard and dedicating their time to craft new ways of teaching, new ways of pedagogy, and new ways of sharing of expertise. So definitely there should be a good understanding between the two parties. We also believe that there should be what we call a 360 degrees collaboration, whereby there are not only academia and industry, there should be regulators, there should be also the society, the associations, whereby they are all working together so that we can get out of this, basically this challenging time. This is ever more needed to have the collaboration between academia and industry. And I believe that would be my last, I wouldn't be too long. So this is really what we are looking really forward is that the training of industry people can also be conducted by the academia personnel, because they are also being very well in touch of what the trend is and what could be solutions. And therefore, I look forward, I mean, I have a say for the African aviation, so please do really consider about this, because the acadestry notion is really yet to be valued for the betterment of the aviation industry across the continent. So that would be also the bottom line is acadestry. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Miguel.
Thank you, Nadiir. Suzanne.
I agree completely with what Nadiir said. I think that not one sector of our industry is going to be able to address the challenges that are going to be facing our future. It's only through cross-sector collaboration. So like you've mentioned, we need regulators in industry and academia, we need operators, we need the forces as well, everybody who's facing the same problems to come together, because I think historically education has had a gap between what we teach and what the industry actually needs. And we haven't always spoken to each other as well as we should. And as you know, I put out a book on engaging the next generation of aviation professionals, which you contributed to. And since that, a lot of the people who've contributed have started collaborating around engaging the next generation of aviation professionals with this focus on our own specific countries, but also working together collaboratively in a way Nadiir has suggested with a variety of different sectors. So I think that the other spin I would like to put on it is beyond collaboration, I think we need an academic subdiscipline, which is a technical way of saying it, but it basically just needs a toolbox. We need to recognize that these challenges are all in a theme that have been presenting struggles to our industry we haven't been able to tackle before around things like diversity and inclusion, sustainability, other factors as well, mental health and retention, professional development, keeping people in careers and happy to be in those careers, that we are not the first sector to face these challenges. And yet, because we haven't had a unified strategy to tackle these in a way where we're all using the same language and working together, I think it's been difficult for us to address them holistically. So that would be my other tag on to Nadiir's excellent point, which is let's create it as a discipline so we're all working together and speaking the same language.
Very good. Rahim, your views?
Okay, right. Thank you, Miguel. For me, in terms of trying to conclude our session today, basically to look at all the difficulties, the challenges as an opportunity where we try to solve problems. Just to give an example, I used to teach the same topic on propulsion for the last 10 years. And then during this pandemic season, I have to re-look back and convert all of the teaching materials into, I have my YouTube channel on, I have other modes of teaching and delivery. And what worries me is basically not on the theoretical part, it's basically on the skill part. That is a big challenge to train our students, to train our technician on, because it's quite difficult unless you move into digital era, you move into artificial intelligence, you move into virtual reality or augmented reality, then you can teach online in terms of how to undo or to open a segment of a undercarriage and so on. So it is a hybrid where you have to do synchronized lesson as well as asynchronous lesson at the same time. So again, a lesson to all of us, probably we have to take the challenge and try to convert it into opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Vicky, what are your takeouts?
Very briefly, I'm going to dovetail on what my fellow panelists have said, which is I think as we are in the pandemic and as we pull out of it, we need a workforce in aviation that has shared competencies that are transferable, a workforce that is mobile. And in order to do that, we have to collaborate all together and create. And from a training perspective, I think if I had my one wish to answer your question, it would be to for all of us to look at, I think we all kind of know what our final goal is in terms of what we want, what kind of competencies we want to build, but to be able to expand our tools in order to achieve them. Just because of the distance between us and the absence of classroom training, we need to be creative and we need to be responsive to these times and make sure that we leverage all that is available to us to create the kind of workforce that we need to deal with this and beyond.
Okay, thank you very much. Wrapping up, we ran out of time. I would like to thank you all very much for your contributions, your presence here.
Thank you.
You are, of course, all invited for Portugal Air Summit 2021 in presence here in Portugal, hopefully.
Yay!
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Stay safe, and thank you very much again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.